They have the lovely number in the bar when he's talking about the dragon. She gets on the barrel keg and she starts doing the twirling number, and then all the other ones start going up, and then all the kegs start exploding because all the beer got shook up. How is that bar owner not going crazy for all this waste?
Where I work right now is in like a social club, so there's a bar aspect of it. And I was just thinking when I was watching this scene, if anything remotely happened, we'd be calling security so fast to be getting people kicked out and banned for life.
We have the chaos of the musical element. The reality is superseded by the musical number, the dictums and the rules of the musical number.
It's subclause 6 in section 30 of the Constitution. If everybody in the bar is in unison in singing, you can do whatever.
Dragon claw, wing and scale. Come now, let's examine a tale of the greatest beast ever considered. Another episode of Big Flying Lizards.
Welcome to Big Flying Lizards, a dragon movie and television podcast. I am your host, Bryce Wilson, and I am joined today by the one, the only, Kurt Crenwelge. He is also known as the Bardic Paladin, a dedicated dungeon master, storyteller, and host to a podcast called Sidekicks and Sidequests. Kurt set out on a solo adventure to create a niche show where he can geek out on Dungeons and Dragons and learn from fellow adventurers. The results, Sidekicks and Sidequests, a labor of love that's now 151 episodes strong. Kurt's journey into D&D started on Halloween night of 2010 with 4th edition campaign and his very first character, Otto von Krieg, a human wizard. Since then, he's fully embraced 5e and as both a DM and a player, weaving stories and sharing his passion with TTRPG community. With a background in music and a commitment to making his show family-friendly, inclusive, and a stunning character art, Kurt brings warmth, humor, and a deep dive into the world of D&D. Kurt, welcome to the podcast.
Howdy, howdy. Thank you for having me and inviting me on the show.
Oh, of course, of course. Is there anything else that, just introducing yourself to the audience, anything else you want to share?
Yeah, sure. Again, one podcast host to another and one editor to another, because, I don't want to certainly cause you any headaches, but Otto von Krieg, like of war, was the name of the wizard that I started playing in 4th edition. But yeah, that was fun. It's crazy to think like 150 episodes. We're in the thick of season 6 right now. I've switched to a monthly model instead of a bi-weekly, which is how the podcast was for 5 seasons. But my family, my son is getting older, and just want to make sure that I'm not like burning the candles at both ends. That I'm striking that balance of family, of fun, and doing what I love. Yeah, so I'm happy to be here. Like I was telling you before we started rolling, it's like my main focus was I wanted to watch the movie. I wanted to keep it all in my brain and not get too lost in the weeds. So, I'm the guest for a change. So I'm just happy to be like our fair young protagonist and to go along on this journey with you, with Elliot at our side.
Well, I mean, you could be Pete, you could be Elliot. I'll be the family that got thrown into the mud if we just want to go ahead and just introduce exactly what movie we're talking about today. We are discussing Pete's Dragon. Pete's Dragon is a 1977 American live-action and animated musical fantasy film directed by Don Chelfie, produced by Jerome Catlin and Ron Miller, written by McClone Mariston. Based on the unpublished short story Pete's Dragon and the USA Forever After by Seton Miller and S.S. Fields. It stars Helen Reddy, Jim Dale, Mickey Rooney, Red Buttons, and Shelley Winters. The project initially was conceived in 1957 as a 2-part episode of Disneyland television series, but it was shelved until it was revived as a musical film in 1975. The film was released in November 3rd, 1977, to mixed reviews from critics, though some praised the animation. The film received 2 nominations of the 50th Academy Awards for musical scoring and original song. Capitol Records released the single Ready performed Candles on the Water with a different arrangement from that in the film, and it reached 27 on the adult contemporary charts. The film spawned a remake made by Walt Disney Picture, released in 2016. Pete's Dragon.
Yeah. I can vividly remember as a kid, because I was born in 88. So Back in my day, we used to have VHS tapes. So I can clearly remember the electric violet green of the actual hard plastic case that I don't know, I probably played with as I was watching the movie, but this would have been like a movie that I would have watched, you know, loads of times as a kid growing up. I know for sure if you asked me what my two favorite movies were growing up, it would be Mary Poppins and Bedknobs and Broomsticks would be like my two favorite childhood movies from growing up. And so, you know, maybe Pete's Dragon could be like a third place, although I know I watched it a bunch of times, but as I'm finding out raising a 4-year old, I'm like, it's really amazing what you can latch on to your memories. And then as you grow up, you're like, oh, I mean, I know I did a thing, but it's like, did I really watch it as closely as I remembered watching it when I was a kid? Kind of a situation.
It's funny you mentioned Mary Poppins there because there was a lot of critics that were actually saying that they were trying to really go off of that nostalgia for Mary Poppins when that was going on. And I did see a lot of similarities between the two. I have a confession to make, and I know, prepare the tomatoes, Nana Vagar. You might be throwing these tomatoes over here. I thought recently, like, you know what? As a child, I was not that big into musicals. Like, the only musical I really enjoyed when I was a child was Prince of Egypt, ironically enough. But Prince of Egypt's still an amazing movie. And I recently, I don't know if you're familiar with Epic the Musical that came out recently, just a musical of the Odyssey. If you haven't,
No, I'm not.
if you haven't checked it out, it's amazing. It's incredible. Like, go check it out. I recently watched that, like, maybe I've been cured. Maybe I enjoy musicals now. And when I watched this, I was like, this movie could have been 90 minutes. This movie could have been 70.
I was watching it on Saturday night and I was watching it on my phone on the Disney Plus app. And I was like, I feel like this movie's shorter, but I was like, oh, we've still got more time to go. Like, I didn't realize this was like a 2 hour plus movie, but like, you know, there was some minor plot elements or B plot elements that you're like, why are we introducing this now? But, you know, they do try and they do manage, in my opinion, I think, to wrap everything up before the end of the 2 hours. But there are some sequences where you're kind of like, I wonder where this is going. Or like as a kid, it's like, like as I'm watching, like, oh yeah, I remember they did this thing, but maybe as a kid, I didn't connect the dots as well. But now being a 37-year-old guy rewatching the movie after however many decades at this point since I last saw it, I'm like, oh, okay, now that makes sense as to why they had to, you know, they had to lay these breadcrumbs out for us to follow to make sense of it.
And I know we'll talk about it when it comes to the individual films, I mean, individual songs, but there's some of those songs that just, I don't know if it was the vibe that just didn't fit well, or if the like. I mean, we'll save it. We'll save it. We'll save it.
Well, it is kind of like, yeah, the vibe of the town. I mean, we're up in Maine, New England, and it's like turn of the century, but you could definitely tell the music is of its time. Like, oh, this is like 70s, like musical music. Maybe not quite like Jesus Christ Superstar or Godspell or some of those other ones, but it's kind of like, you know, big and brassy and bombastic and somber and serious at times, and just, you know, lighthearted and fun, which is like what you want in a family kids movie. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's clearly a lot of love that went into this. I know that it was shelved and there was a lot of different things that went into it, but at the same time, something I find a little ironic, it was, yes, it's based in Maine, but do you know where they filmed it primarily?
Probably California.
Yep, it was filmed in Montana Del Oro State Park, California.
Okay, yeah.
As far away from Maine as you could get states-wise.
Right. Well, you know, talking about the movie, you know, paying attention to the credits. I mean, I know I was like, man, you know, do I have time to sit down and watch it? I'm a busy family man. I was like, maybe I could check out one of these YouTubers who's done it. And I've never watched CinemaSins before, but like I guess he's like a very poo-pooer sort of a YouTuber guy that's like, let me point out everything wrong or a thing that I have a personal distaste for. And I only could get in like the first minute or two of that video where I was like, no, 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 I have to watch it for myself and judge it on my own accord and merits. I was surprised watching the credits and realizing that the animation director of the animation sequences, Don Bluth. So this is like Don Bluth when he works at Disney before he goes off and, you know, does his own stuff with like, you know, The Secret of Nim and all the other great masterpieces that Don Bluth has gone on to do.
That's one of the fun things about these films that we're just really getting our feet into and discovering. For example, we talked about, I don't know if you've heard of the film Q, the Winged Serpent, but it's a horror detective film where Quetzalcoatl comes to New York and he starts just killing people. And it was not a well-received movie. It lost money, but a lot of people that were involved with it were actually involved with Lord of the Rings later down the road.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Ron Clements also was an animator on this. And I know for sure I've seen Ron Clements in like later, he's in thousands Disney animated movies. I'm pretty sure like Ron Clements was Treasure Planet or maybe some of these other big name Disney animated movies you've seen later on the line. So it's like way back when in 1977, and like here's Ron Clements helping to animate Elliot the Dragon. And then years later, he gets promoted up the ranks of Disney, and now he's directing, killer animated movies and stuff.
I have so many questions I want to pose to you that's on that, but I feel like it'd do a lot better and make more sense if we actually dived into the chapters discussing parts of the film. So if it's all right with you, I'd love to jump into chapter 1 of what's going on in this film.
Sure, let's go for it.
All right, Chapter 1, Escape and Discovery. Pete, an orphan, escapes the abusing Goggins with help with the unseen force named Elliot. The Goggins pursue Pete, threatening punishment, but eventually give up their search. The next morning, Elliot is revealed to be a green dragon who can turn invisible. Pete and Elliot visit a town where Elliot's invisible clumsiness causes chaos, leading to superstitious townsfolk label Pete as bad luck. Lampy, the drunk lighthouse keeper, sees Elliot and panics, but the townspeople dismiss him. Nora, Lampy's daughter, finds Pete and Elliot in a seaside cave, warns them of the tide, and offers Pete shelter. Pete learns of Nora's lost fiance, Paul, and promises to ask Elliot to help him. I just want to first say the opening scene where the Goggins are chasing after Pete, I loved just... I am so nostalgic for practical sets and just how amazing that forest looked. Like, even though it does not look like any forest I've ever seen in America, it still looked pretty incredible there.
Right. That you have to remember that, this is taking place in Maine, but as you said, we're filming it in California, so hopefully too many people aren't taking notice of it. But yeah, even the practical effect of like Pete up suspended in the air, like he's around the neck of Elliot the Dragon, and then he gets set down. It would have been, well, I mean, maybe it would have been difficult then, but as I was watching the movie, I was considering like, you never see these footprints. And maybe it would have been hard to do. I will compliment them and say, like, with the shadows on the ground, like the animated shadows, great. And they played with the lighting and the set to make it believable that Elliot would be in the same space as like the physical characters in real life. But it's like, yeah, we never saw like indentions in the ground. So I don't know, my D&D brain, I was trying to think like, in D&D, do we have any kinds of dragons that are like, these trickstery kind of characters? And I'm sitting over here trying to Google like what sort of dragons would be from the Feywild, and the only thing I can get would be like fairy dragons from the pseudo dragon family, but those are like tiny, so they wouldn't be large. And the only other large dragon that I might know that would be in the Feywild in D&D terms would be like the Jabberwocky, like straight up lifted from Alice in Wonderland. And I don't think he's exactly a Jabberwocky either, but he is some sort of like Feywild inspired dragon as far as my take is on the situation.
It's funny you say that, because what I was thinking, like, it's a little similar, but almost the completely opposite direction. I was thinking that Elliot was Raishawn's derpy, good younger brother from Critical Role. She's the ancient green dragon who can turn invisible, but she's all malicious, while Elliot's like, oh, I can turn invisible and I'm just a little trickster.
Yeah, it doesn't even talk, but it's kind of like an assumed language between Pete and Elliot. Like, Pete can understand the dragon just fine, and maybe that just comes with like, the idea of like childhood, and children can understand and know things and see things and believe things that adults are just, too jaded to be able to notice or something like that.
It really is one of those things that's really interesting to me, that if it wasn't for the physical, like Elliot hitting the Goggins into the mud, I could have gone the entire movie thinking that Elliot was actually just an imaginary friend, like just
Right,
because.
exactly. Yeah, he doesn't have any weight or dimension, or he doesn't take up space in the physical world, but he does. It's just we see him animated as opposed to like in the remake that they did, it's all CGI and it's like, you know, maybe because of our modern sensibilities, it's a little easier to like believe like, oh, like there's a dragon like physically taking up space, but because it's like, coming off of the era of like Mary Poppins and stuff like that, here's 2D animation on the same screen occupying the same space that we're supposed to believe, like when they all jump into the chalk paintings and they're having the lovely holiday with Mary and the penguins are dancing with Dick Van Dyke. It's like, oh, that's a bridge too far. But then in the remake movies with CGI furry fuzzy Elliot the dragon, yeah, it's like, oh, that's more believable or something.
Yeah. Now, I feel like this is a good point to it's one of the conversations I wanted to have with you.
Mm.
While I was watching it, I was really wishing that we would have had the entire thing animated rather than having a hybrid. I would have rather seen almost like an Aristocats sort of situation.
Oh, okay. No, I could see that. I mean, I would have been fine if the movie were animated. Could have had, you still could have had the stellar voice acting. I mean, seeing Mickey Rooney as the lighthouse keeper. I mean, granted, I know we're discussing Act One, and well, he has shown up because in your description, but I'm remembering him as like, oh, Mickey Rooney. He's the voice of Santa Claus in Santa Claus is Coming to Town, the Rankin Bass thing that happened in the 1960s. And it's like, we know Mickey Rooney's voice. It's very distinctive. Kind of a, well, I'm doing a poor job of his singing there. And I am a trained singer, but anyway, yeah. So like Mickey Rourke or Mickey Rooney, Mickey Rourke would be completely different in that role. Mickey Rooney, on the other hand, very distinctive personality, and the over the top lighthouse keeper. That's, oh, you're the drunk of the town, and oh yeah, you're the one that sees a dragon, and like no one else believes him. Which I mean, I guess that's a trope. That's a story item of like, oh, the one crazy person in town, like Belle's dad in Beauty and the Beast, like, oh, I saw the beast. It's like, oh yeah, sure you did, Maurice. Sort of an attitude.
And sort of on that thread, though, what is more perfect of an occupation for the town drunk than the keeper of the lighthouse? I feel like that's almost comes with the job.
Right. Well, yeah, it's like during the day, what else do you have to do? Like, okay, I guess I'm going to go drink and go hang out with all the other sailors and trade news and just, I guess, go into town, make sure we have enough kerosene for the lanterns and enough spare wicks and glass bulbs and stuff to make sure that our lighthouse works like it's supposed to.
I mean, yeah. Going back though, like I did love the set of the city, which I know it's a whole song, but I'm going to butcher it just like the snake salesman over here.
Dr. Terminus.
Passamaquoddy.
Yeah, Dr. Terminus. Yeah.
Passamaquoddy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very funny song.
We'll get to it. It's definitely one of those things where I love how the set is and how it's laid out, and it's really just would take away if we did only have the animated portion of it. But I feel like the lighthouse runner would make more sense being animated. I feel like the snake oil, I know you just said his name, but the snake oil salesman would have made more sense. They would have made him sleazy and animated. I could see him like really tall, like really slender, having the long fingers and just like sort of thing, and having the Shmee almost sidekick who's helping him out. But again, like one thing I like to do on the podcast is take an element and just tweak it in the way of how I would have done it differently. And again, I'm not one, like I know that Mary Poppins was just such a huge hit and they were just trying to catch lightning twice. And it's not that this film wasn't successful. I think I was reading that it had the budget of like 15 million, maybe 10 million, and it grossed 39 million, which,
yeah, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page too. A budget of 10 million, granted in 1970s dollars, but then its box office is somewhere estimated between 36 to 39.6 million.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously they made their money. Like they came out on top on there. But I'm almost wondering if they would have saved money if they just fully animated it versus trying to do the practical effects and then trying to incorporate. And there was a few points where it just, like, particularly, and again, I know this is the end, jumping all around, but when Paul is sailing back, you can totally tell that that's just not a thing. Like, he is totally in front of a screen right there. It's not.
Yeah, the blue screen. Well, you mentioned sailing back, and you happen to know who played the mayor of Passamaquoddy was Jim Backus, who famously Thurston Howell the Third Lovey from Gilligan's Island. So it's like seeing him come out, like, and growing up as a kid later on, being like, "Oh, I love Gilligan's Island," and Thurston Howell the Third. What's his scheme to try and get rich on a deserted island with 6 other people? And so just seeing him come out every time with a cigar, and he's like finishing up a big meeting and like, yep, that's how we're going to do it. That's how we're going to brand the town, rebrand the town and put us on the map. And then something would happen that he would trip and fall because the stairs had been ripped away, or like his cigar gets smashed because he bumps into Elliot the dragon or whatever it is. And it's like some physical gimmick of him losing his cigar and having his comeuppance in some way as the town mayor.
I did just love it because I feel like every scene there was something going wrong with those stairs. Before we get too far ahead, I have been doing a horrible job at neglecting the fine people in the chat over here. And Josh over here is saying that he would, in another life, would have loved to be a life housekeeper, while our Nana Vagar, on the other hand, said that job I couldn't do. I'd go insane. I feel like
I think there was a whole movie about that where Willem Dafoe went insane. I haven't seen it, but I've seen the memes where he's like all wild-eyed and crazy.
What movie does he not go insane, though? Let's be real.
That's true. You make a fair point.
I love William Dafoe. He's probably one of my favorite just out there actors.
It was a firefight. Yeah.
Did you ever see the new Nosferatu movie?
I don't really do horror movies. Like, I can do zombie movies and classic movie monsters, but I'm not really much for the gore and the super psycho thrillers and stuff like that. No, I've not seen Nosferatu. I know, well, I mean, the internet has a number of different reactions. Some of them, like, wow, this is a really great horror movie, to the ladies at Halloween who get crazy for their guys dressing up in ghost face masks and stuff like that. I'm going to keep this family friendly, and I'm, no shade or anything like that to anyone. If you're a consenting adult and that's what you want to do, that's on you. That's cool. Just don't hurt anyone else, or, drag anyone else into your good times that doesn't want to be dragged into your good times. So.
Exactly. And a ghost face mask, don't know what you're talking about. This is wouldn't know anything about that on my side of the internet over here.
Right. It would have to be a dragon mask or something like that.
Hey, you saw the post I made over there. Is there anything else? I feel like the first chapter was definitely more of an introduction portion, but is there anything else you want to discuss before we dive into the meat?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, it's setting us up that, Pete is an orphan. He does not have parents. The Goggins, who, not to be confused with Walton Goggin, who is a great dude, but no, the Goggins, sorry, not Goggins, but the Goggins, they're clearly an abusive family. They're taking advantage of a poor orphan boy, making him do all these chores. They're using it. It's basically glorified slavery, indentured servitude, because, the mom is always going around like, oh, I paid $50 for him, and then like 50 cents for legal fees. And so for $50, I own a human boy that's going to do all my work, while me and Pa and my 2 adult sons just get to kick back and benefit off of child labor. Awful villains. You already know that the Goggins are not to be rooted for in this movie.
No.
And then, he gets to, and Elliot get to have their little misadventure of entering the town and immediately turning the town hostile to them. They meet Lampy, the lighthouse keeper, which is, well, I mean, I guess kind of like a interesting, well, I mean, probably an on-the-nose nickname for him, because he works in a lighthouse, and, oh, that's Lampy, like old Lampy. It would have been fun to know, like, his actual name. I mean, I know that Helen Reddy's character, refers to him as her dad. But yeah, we get to meet her, and she's lovely, and everyone, they have the lovely number in the bar when he's talking about the dragon. And
that was a fun number.
Yeah, that was a fun number. And I do distinctly remember like she gets on the barrel keg and she starts doing the twirling number, and then all the other ones start going up, and then all the kegs start exploding because all the beer got shook up. So it's like, wow, how is that bartender, bar owner, not going crazy for all this waste of, like, you have just depleted my entire inventory of my tavern. Get out, Lampy. You are blacklisted, never allowed in here again.
So I know I mentioned over our DMs, I work in events, and specifically where I work right now is in like a social club. So there's a bar aspect of it. And I was just thinking when I was watching this scene, like if anything remotely happened, we'd be calling security so fast to be getting people kicked out and banned for life. Like it's not.
Right, but because we have the chaos of the musical element, the reality is superseded by the musical number, the dictums and the rules of the musical number. And so all sins are forgiven for the benefit of art and music.
It's subclause 6 in section 30 of the Constitution.
This is America. When we have a musical number, all bets are off.
If everybody in the bar is in unison in singing, you can do whatever you want.
Stealing drinks from people the whole time, and no one gets angry at him for just stealing sips of their whiskey and their beer and their booze.
Better times.
Yeah, and then let's see. Yeah, so Act 1 wraps up, and then we're starting to get ready to have the meeting between. I'm scanning the list just to make sure Nora. So we're planning for the meeting between Nora and Pete. So then that way, I'll take you in so you can stay with me, because they're wandering the beach and they're gonna go down in the cave because that's where they stay first, because they're like, man, the town hates us. It's like, I guess we'll just go stay in this cave. And that's when Nora sees them and is like, okay, let's go check on them, because we don't want any kids wandering into this sea cave underneath the lighthouse that fills up with seawater and stuff like that. So you also know that Nora's a good person, because whereas, like, Gogan over here is waving about her bill of sale for $50 as like a small defenseless child on their own. I don't want them to be hurt. So let's go down and look after this child.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. Just sort of jogged another thought that I was having. But the whole scene of when Pete was like screaming at Elliot and how like saying how Elliot just ruined everything. That was like a low key, a little bit of an emotional scene right there, because we quickly find out that Elliot is not, and we'll dive more into Elliot's character at the end of the podcast when we discuss his character, but
Sure.
Elliot is far from a malicious character. He's mischievous. Like
he's a trickster. He's a trickster figure.
Definitely a trickster figure, but he is not trying to cause any problems. And the last thing he wants is to cause problems for Pete specifically. And he's like almost a guardian angel. So when you see Pete coming in and just like ripping into Elliot, it was one of those things of just like, man, like I know it's that they were going to get past it, but it's just one of those things where it doesn't make you feel good.
Right. Well, having a 4-year-old son, I know what that feeling is like when your kid is upset with you, and because they can't control their emotions, they're just yelling and screaming their head off, turning red in the face because dude, it's like 9 o'clock. You cannot play Xbox. You have to go to bed. And he's just like screaming at you and just saying like all, granted he's 4, so he doesn't really know any naughty words or anything like that to call me, while, I'm his father and I'm going to correct any, bad behavior and just be like, dude, calm down. Like, it's time for bed. Like, you can play Xbox tomorrow and whatever. Elliot, is very much like you were saying, a guardian angel type figure, a trickster figure, sympathetic to Pete's, distraught emotions. So he plays on it, and he's like, so he's like sad and making, his like moans and clicks and just, and then, eventually they're able to work it out. So it's not like, kids are, as I'm learning, like kids can be angry, for 5 seconds and then immediately turn around and forget that they were ever mad at you to begin with. So it's definitely apparent with Pete and Elliot's relationship. It's not like Pete harbors hatred or anything like that for Elliot for goofing off in the town, or unintentionally goofing off in the town and wrecking things and making a bad first impression, but they're able to patch things up fairly quickly. Kids bounce back. And Elliot does the work literally to help, make amends and forget forgiveness and show up and be a good friend and protector for Pete.
And how long can you actually be mad at a dragon who's there?
That's true. Yeah. How long can you be mad at a cartoon dragon that just wants to have fun with you? It's like, oh, I can't be mad at you. It's like, oh, you goofed, but like, come here, you.
Well, it's the same. I have two dogs, and I love them. They are the dumbest creatures on the face of the planet, but I love them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll come home and find out like my couch is chewed up, or a
Mm.
pair of boots are been chewed up, and like it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, I want, like, I get frustrated, but at the same time I'm like, okay, they're just going insane, like they're just doing what they do, like I can't, like I should have done something there. And I feel like it's very like, obviously I have the adult attitude of it versus Pete, but it's sort of that same attitude of like, oh, Elliot just wants to have fun, he just wants to do that, he doesn't not quite understand what he's doing. He's a he's a dragon living in a human world. But let's go ahead and jump into chapter 2 if you're all right with that.
All right. Chapter 2.
Trouble in town. Dr. Terminus arrives, a fraudulent doctor and his assistant, to swindle the townspeople. They are angry with him and his return. Lampy and Hoagie encounter Elliot in a cave, but their attempt to prove his existence fails and they flee in terror. The townspeople blame Pete for the lack of fish when fishermen have been fishing, but Nora defends Pete. Elliot causes havoc at Pete's school, smashing into the building and leaving his silhouette in the wall, furthering frightening the town. After learning of Elliot's existence, Dr. Terminus plots to exploit the dragon for profit using his body parts for fake remedies. The Gorgons arrive with legal documents claiming ownership of Pete, but Nora refuses to hand him over. Elliot saves Pete by sinking the Gorgons' boat.
Goggins.
Gorgons, the G's.
Gorgons, like, well, no, actually, in D&D, the Gorgons are the metallic bulls, but in Greek mythology, those are like the snake hairs, the Medusas. Yeah, yeah. Very different story. If it's a bunch of Gorgons coming around town, suddenly everyone's petrified,
Well,
and then Elliot is the only one who can save them, I guess.
where's this fantasy epic?
Well, now you're describing Act 2 and like more of the mischief happening in town. And my Dungeon Master brain just can't help it. Like, this would be a very fun low level adventure of like, well, there's a strange orphan boy who showed up in town, and like all these weird things keep happening around town. And finally, in the schoolhouse, like, the big cartoonish like Kool-Aid man through the wall. It's like, you can clearly say, like, we the audience can tell like, oh, that's a cartoon dragon, but to them in the verisimilitude of the world, they're like, well, that's a dragon, like that just burst through the wall. Yeah, alluding back to Act 1, Pete stumbles into all the kids, and they're all late, and the teacher doesn't like him. The petticoat skirt thing rips, and so the teacher already doesn't like Pete coming into the classroom. But Nora's like, hey, he needs to go to school, and there's a whole bit where like Pete is like, well, I know what 9 plus 9 is, and I know what 9 times 9 is, and I know what the capital of this place is. But then Nora's like, no, I'm still going to be a responsible guardian. You need to go to school. So that's what sets off the chain of events, because Elliot is sad, kind of like the story of Bo Peep or something like that. Like, oh, we followed you to school, and I'm bored that you're in school, so I'm going to cause some mischief, ringing the bell, making you think like, oh, hey, school's over. But then, yeah, like a whole bunch of hijinks and stuff happen. And man, what a character that Dr. Terminus is, and Hoagie, his little stooge, coming into town. Yeah, and as we were alluding to, the very funny song where he's very quickly trying to remember the name of the town, and he can't do it until like Hoagie like has to whisper it to him, and he's like, oh yes, Passamaquoddy, I love coming here, and I love helping you. And then is finally able to like win the crowd over in the same vein as the Simpsons monorail song, or alluding to another musical, the Music Man, the guy who comes to town and sells the idea of a marching band, and oh, you have to watch out for the pool hall, like, because that's what gets boys into trouble. But you know what won't get them in trouble? An after school boys band. And then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, now we're sold on the idea. So Dr. Terminus comes in, and he's pushing all these remedies with Hoagie very humorously switching between different characters to prove, quote unquote, the legitimacy of these snake oils that he's selling, because it's the early 1900s. There's no FDA. There's no one to certify the legitimacy of these medicines. So quack medicine and wagons just traveling from town to town is just the mainstay. And if it's not some sort of just whiskey and I don't know, paint thinner or whatever else he puts in his medicine, I don't quite know. Or see, at one point he's talking about it later on. He's like, is it 10 parts seawater to something else to something else? And so, yeah, you get a very funny scene of that later where he's trying to figure out his quack medicine mixes and stuff.
I actually really like that they chose to go with a snake oil salesman for a villain. And I wish that there'd be more of that because I think it's a very unique sort of villain in the sense that you have to be extremely charismatic to be a snake oil salesman.
Right.
And like, if we're again tying it to D&D, like I feel like bards would be the closest thing to
Yeah.
a snake oil salesman. Like some people would say rogue, but I'm like, no, I think you have to, like, it's not about like trying to swindle people. It's about making people to believe. They want to believe you. So you're
Right.
selling them a
You're
story.
convincing them that it's in their best interest to give you all their money over to them.
Exactly.
Without
It's
threatening you, just being like, look at this song and dance, cha-cha-cha. And it's like, see, clearly it works. And then his stooge is like just switching out costumes behind the scenes and making the townspeople who collectively rolled their insight checks very low and they just believe what this guy has to say. Yeah.
That is something I was thinking though during that scene. Like, hey, this is a very small town. You're telling me that nobody was like, huh, I don't recognize that lady, or huh,
Well,
who's
during
this?
the song, one guy takes off his hat and he's like, "You gave me pink hair," and like he's among the throng that's convinced that like, oh, it was just a fluke. Don't worry about it. Like the next one you take from me won't turn your hair pink.
Well, that's a question. Would you rather have your hair pink or would you rather have your hair gray?
Yeah, it's like I got the lumbago, I've got the rictus in my back. It's like, oh, here, take this, and yeah, Hoagie at one point has the crutches, and then he dramatically throws the crutches off, and he's like, woohoo, I'm healed. And then everyone's like, okay, like, yeah, one of the first ladies who called him out as far as like, you came to this town and you deceived us, and like in the song, she's one of the first ones to be like, all right, I believe you now. Here's my money. Here's my dollars. And he's charging $1 for like everything, which again, the data only goes back to 1913. So unfortunately, we can't, if this had been done 13 years later instead of the early 1900s, I'd have been able to get you a proper inflation. But let's say if it was like $1. So as far as 1913 is concerned, $1 in 1913 has the same buying power as $32.40 in 2025 money. So $1 was a lot of money back then, and
Went a long way.
probably was worth even more in 1900. So there you go.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he clearly was scamming people, and like he was over there trying to say like, hey, we have to use a sale because we had to sell off the horses to pay off our debt. Like we need to.
And that was a very fun thing where they come in. It almost kind of seems like a Mr. Toad-esque sort of like driving machine, but they have a land sale. So they're land pirates, if you will. If you remember the Disney show, it's not Camelot, but there was the Disney musical fantasy show. Someone in your comments is going to shout it out and tell us what the name of that show was, because I'm blanking on it.
Hey, they'll let us know. They'll let us know on that front. No, I mean, I did love the whole anchor because
that's what rips up the stairs, and then that's how Thurston Howell III falls on his face. Yeah.
Well, the second time he falls on his face.
Right, because I think he gets splashed with paint or something the first time.
You're right. I think I was
the gag with the eggs, which was very funny, cleverly, like the eggs are like wibbly wobbly like that. The cement gets ruined, and then someone's and then he runs does the classic childhood thing of like, oh, let me run a stickle on the fence. Elliot does it, and then the fence just explodes. Yeah, so like all those hijinks are happening every time that Pete and Elliot walk into town.
Yeah. But I love that he's Dr. Terminus is bringing just as much chaos, if not more chaos, than Pete and Elliot.
More malpractice to the town.
For sure. One of my favorite scenes in the movie was when Lampy and Hoagie went into Elliot's cave.
Yes.
It was such a fun scene just to see, because again, it just shows how
much of a lush that Lampy is. Because again, it's where he's drunk and he's like, oh, there's a dragon. And then Hoagie's like, dragon? Okay, sure. Like, we're drunk enough. And Dr. Terminus is like, whatever, Hoagie, you're off the clock with me, I guess. Go have fun with the lighthouse keeper. And they go down to the cave. Yeah, and then and he comes back and he's all like, he can't talk. And then he's like, I got scared sober. Like, so now you know I'm telling the truth. And then that's when they start looking up the book. Because apparently they have like some ancient alchemical book, which was very fun to me listening to the song and knowing my cursory knowledge of D being like, so what are the different parts of dragon that we can use? And it's like certain parts of a dragon will make you thin and other parts will make you live forever. And then other parts will just help you stop your male pattern baldness and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to talk about that song. Well, actually, no, this technically is like the portion where he does, because that song like is very, it's actually really
the thesis statement. Once Dr. Terminus buys into like the existence of the dragon, that becomes the mantra then for Dr. Terminus and Hoagie to be like, we're gonna rip him up, we're gonna tear him up, we're gonna chop him up, we're gonna process him, and we're gonna make mint. We're gonna make bank off of this dragon. This animated dragon we're gonna somehow bring into the third dimension, and then we're gonna harvest his organs for our financial benefit.
Yeah, and if you listen to the lyrics and listen to what's going on, it is a dark song. They're literally talking about ripping up Elliot and like selling him for parts, but it's such a like happy jingle and such a like go lucky song. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, he is just an evil bard because he's turning like this gruesome act into something like cheerful and happy where you can be like taking the cane and doing like the whole can right there while ripping apart a lovable dragon. But what I was going with that is it wasn't until it was a financial benefit for Dr. Terminus that because he was almost treating like, oh yeah, a dragon. I've seen that one before. Like, yeah, you go ahead, Hoagie, you go see the dragon. I'm going to go actually play dentist or whatever he was doing with that contraption where he was telling him not to break the guy's jaw.
Oh yeah, don't move and keep your foot on the pedal. And the guy's like, yeah, very funny.
I did really, the whole Elliot just being terrified literally of his own shadow. Like he's a dragon that is terrified of his own shadow in that scene where they're in the cave like that. It was just fun to see that. And they're both just so drunk that they don't realize.
Right. It's like, was it really real or was it my imagination? But with Hoagie, he got scared sober. So I don't think I've ever seen that happen in life where someone's been so scared that they went from, drunken stupor to sober that fast. But I'm sure a dragon would do that.
Well, I will just share the short tangent. When I was working at one place, I was told that some of my employees had their car stolen while I was at a music festival. So I was not sober at the time when I was at the music festival, but I sobered up really quickly after getting that phone call. So I know that it can happen, but I think I was scared for a little bit of a wrong reason there. But I wonder why they even brought the Goggins back. Like, I feel like the show would have
quote unquote their property's missing. They likely are going to go to they've probably been searching from town to town because it's been at least a couple days. And I guess from where the movie began, there was at least they were close enough to that place so that like, oh, that must be the most likely place that they would have ended. So they finished with their mud wrestling or getting out of the mud because they've all been knocked around by Elliot the dragon. They're like, okay, well, now that we've got our wagon and we're performing our proper search of the area, Passamaquoddy's probably the most likely place that our kid would have ended up. So let's go look for him there.
I guess it does make sense on that front. I was sitting there just like, why did they choose this town of all places to go and look? But like, it probably was just the closest, but it also doesn't look at all like the forest scene in the beginning. It's a very different, especially that last shot where the four of them are walking towards the lighthouse and it's more just the fields. That doesn't look anything remotely like the forest that we saw them running around in. But who am I? Who am I to decide?
Right. Movie magic, right?
Exactly. I feel like I've been doing an awful job this episode of doing the chat, but it just looks like Josh and Nana Vega are just flirting with each other this entire time over here.
Yeah, I know. If you see me just kind of like staring politely, it's me going back to check the chat as well to see if anyone figured out the name of that Disney musical show. I know it's about a princess and she's off on her adventure, and it's literally like a musical TV show. And what I was getting at with my tangent was that there was a group of pirates, but they were on the land. And so they were land pirates, and like their big wagon had a big sail on it. And I was like, oh, I wonder if Disney remembered Pete's Dragon, like, hey, didn't we do like a big wagon with like a sail on it? We should do that idea again because that was fun the first time, sort of a.
Yeah, all I'm seeing is Jake and the Neverland Pirates, but I don't think that that's what it is.
No, it was live action. I do remember that. And it was a musical, and it was like very fantasy based, and someone, not wanting to be married, and just going off on their own sort of adventure of self discovery, along with, you know, misadventures along the way. Within the last 10 years or so, I feel like is when the show came.
Is there anything else in this second chapter that we want to cover, Kurt, before diving into the final act and the details that remain there?
Yeah, let's see. So, I mean, we've got, we had the great showdown and Nora standing up, being a good motherly figure. And again, just the Goggins hypocrisy and idiocy on display of like, I have a bill of sale for $50. And it's like, you know, like I know, thank goodness for eventual laws about like, child labor laws and like, proper agencies forming for handling the adoption of children and stuff like that. It's just, again, it's the 70s, and it's the 70s lens of telling a story about the early 1900s. So it's just kind of like, oh, people look at it in our modern lenses and viewpoints, and they're like, oh, how awful. And it's like, well, yeah, it is awful. And maybe back then they wouldn't have seen it as quite awful, but no, it is quite bad that it's like this family is like, here's our indentured servant, our slave that, we want back. And Nora's just standing her ground with her dad and just like, no, we're not. No, this isn't right. You're not going to take this boy back. He's, I'm looking after him. You know, I am woman, hear me roar. And then Elliot, because probably also a thing that helped save on the animation was like this whole idea of like Nora explained like, oh, I loved someone once, Paul, but he went down in a shipwreck, but I still have hope that he's alive. And Lampy, the dad, is like, you got to give up on some things. And so Nora's conflicted about that of like, oh, do I encourage this child who has this fantasy of a dragon that they see? But meanwhile, I'm also holding on to my own fantasy of like my love returning that was lost at sea. And so then, Pete in all his goodness is like, well, Elliot, you're a dragon, you're magical, you can do all these things. You should go and find Paul. And that probably saved on animation with not having to have Elliot in every scene. That explains why Elliot dips out for a while and just gets to be a kid, in this foster family situation, this ward situation being raised up. And then to have like the really cool torpedo effect come through the water and sink the Goggins ship as they're waterlogged and they're like, oh, we've been foiled again, sort of a thing, for them to work to eventually team up with Dr. Terminus to be like, oh, we really should go get this dragon and team up, because they end up in the saloon, the tavern, and they're all sick and sniffly. And then Dr. Terminus is like, well, you know that Pete kid, and you happen to know this dragon, so let's team up. What were two separate antagonistic forces come together for different motivations and different reasons. So in D&D, two completely different bad guys who have a connection to one of the player characters, the heroes, and is like, okay, well, we're going to temporarily ally ourselves in order to get what we want. In this case, Dr. Terminus wants the dragon. The Goggins want their kid slave back to go do all their work on the farm.
I agree that it really does enhance the story, but like the skeptic in me is like, what did they actually like? They did not need the Goggins though throughout that. Like Dr. Terminus did not need the Goggins in that sort of situation. Like, what did they actually add to the plan? Other than
catching Pete. Well, no, because they had to capture Pete, and Pete is the bait for Elliot to show up. Because it's like Elliot's a trickster dragon figure, so why would Elliot just on his own show up? It's not like you can lay a trail of hot dogs down and that Elliot's going to follow the hot dogs and go eat them. It's like, no, Elliot is inextricably tied to Pete. Pete's dragon, like the name of the movie. So it's like you have to get Pete. You have to capture Pete, steal him, use him as bait. Elliot will come running. Okay, now I can capture the dragon and get what I want. And very cool effect of like wireframing. So it's that way of blending, starting to blend the 2D with the 3D, because like the notes going, and it's like the lion roar in the trash can sort of a thing of like, and the dragon's roaring around, and the townspeople are like, oh, we gotta hold him down, and all that, before Elliot just materializes from invisible to visible, and then we see him in his 2D form as he's smashing around and trying to rescue Pete.
I guess that does make sense. It's just, I don't know. I feel like that Dr. Terminus could have captured Pete on his own without the Goggins, like the Goggins, them tricksters. Yeah. But like, if it wasn't like, again, like I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, it's a bad decision that they did that. It's just the entire time I'm like, why did, like, if they were even slightly competent, they would have realized, oh, we can profit on the dragon as well and add some dividends. They were just so focused.
Right.
Like,
but the Gorgons are also depicted. I don't know. It wouldn't be right geographically, because I mean, I know the Appalachian Mountains are there, but quote unquote hillbillies are like from further south along the mountain range, in my understanding. My only experience is playing a lot of Fallout 76 and sort of knowing the map of that area. But it's like, yeah, Maine and West Virginia are pretty far removed from each other. So I don't know how, a bunch of hillbillies would show up in the story. But the idea is like, they're rural people. They have this idea of like, get rich quick because we have a child slave that'll just do all our work for us. And they're not very bright and educated. So again, the charismatic evil bard character of Dr. Terminus comes in and is like, hey, this kid. This kid has a dragon. The dragon is attached to the kid. So I need to whip you family into a frenzy so that way you'll be motivated to go kidnap Pete. And then that way we can get the dragon. As well as Dr. Terminus is able to rally up everyone, like, whisper hush hush in the town, like, hey, meet at the docks at this time tonight. Yeah, we're going to, all these problems, all the fish that aren't showing up and all the havoc in the town, we're finally going to do something about it. And so that's another way that Dr. Terminus is able to endear himself to this town that once hated his guts when he first rolled in.
It's interesting that you brought that up, because that was something that did just, I mean, it did strike to me. And again, like, I know that these are separate characters, but you see the parallels. Like, you see in Pocahontas how the villain in there was able to just rally his men and be the whole Savages song. That's just iconic. And then like in Beauty and the Beast, how Gaston is able to rally all of the townsfolk. And it's sort of that ability.
It's scapegoating mentality. Because it's like, oh, the dragon is the problem. And, people, there's a great philosopher thinker guy that's out there, mimetic theory, and the writings of Rene Girard and stuff like that. And people, mobs form, and there's a tension or something in the community, and the easiest way for the community to be satisfied without outright breaking out into violence against each other and destroying the whole community is just like, oh, let's pick one thing that's going to be our sacrifice, our scapegoat. We're going to thrust all of our issues and problems and insecurities and shortcomings onto this one thing to absolve us of our sins. And then the tension is released and the town can go back to its normal resting state as it was. And so this Pete kid shows up and he has this dragon, and, like, oh, this is such a problem in the town, and everyone's stressed. And so that's how everyone's able to get convinced by this snake oil salesman who, again, they knew, like, hey, this guy is bad news in this town. Like, you turned my hair pink and like you didn't cure my thing, but like he's able to whip him up, and the townsfolk are desperate for some solution. And so they just think, if we could just capture this dragon, then all of our problems will disappear. Never mind, the fish and the seasons and the storms and all that other normal sort of stuff.
And you know what, Kurt? I am just so glad that in the year of our Lord 2025, we don't have any more charismatic snake oil salesmen picking a marginalized person or marginalized community to rally people's anger and frustration towards that. You don't ever see that. The last time it ever happened was early 19.
Oh, I see what you did there. Tip of the nose. Yes, I see what you did there. Yeah. Well, it's a tale as old as time, my friend. That's just the theory. If you want to, learn more about it, mimetic theory and Rene Girard and scapegoating. It's like, it's a whole thing, man.
I love just looking at the complexity of villains. I feel like villains are oftentimes so much more fascinating than the heroes themselves, just because there's so many different types of villains that are out there. I don't know if you enjoy anime or not, but
I enjoy a little anime from now and then. I'm not a weeb. I'm not knee deep in it, but like I remember coming home from school and being like, "Oh, Gundam Wing," or waking up on Saturday morning being like Dragon Ball Z, stuff like that. And a couple of ones we've watched on Netflix over the years or other shows. So, yeah, I enjoy anime. Miyazaki movies, of course, are fantastic.
of course. I think that I love seeing the range because you'll get like a Frieza that's like they're just pure evil.
Mhm.
There's nothing, there's no good redeeming quality about them. They're just over there. They're evil. They want
And
to conquer the world.
Piccolo was a villain starting off, right? And then he became a good guy.
There was complexity to Piccolo. Like, yes, it started off like, oh, he's evil, he's a villain, but you come to find out that he's very similar. He's like the yang to Goku's yin. Just he's trying to be the best, he's trying to be the strongest, but he's also isolated because but that's again like what I love about villains is there's different layers. You'll get the pure evil, and then you'll get the morally gray, and then you get even up to close where you're like, using X-Men as an example, Magneto.
Mm.
Magneto will always be one of my favorite villains because
Mhm.
he's so close to being a hero. And if you just like shift one decision to the left a little bit, he is a hero. But at the end of
But
the day,
because this is a family movie, it's a Disney movie, but like more important at its core, it's a family movie and it's a musical. Sometimes kids just need to understand, that bad guys are bad because they do bad things, and we see them doing bad things. So the Gogans are bad because they're a bad family that mistreat Pete, as and kids maybe not know like slavery and indentured servitude and stuff like that, but they know that like the Gogans are mean. They're talking about like beating them up, and like, they're using hyperbole about like, because I think what Cinnamon Sins talked about, like in the first 5 seconds of just listening to their little hillbilly song about like, we're going to wrestle him, we're going to eat him and beat him up and stuff like that. It's like, he says they're cannibals. And I don't think that's the case. I just think that's them being all on their hyperbole about like all the various things that they can do to Pete, because like, we own him. We bought him for $50 and 50 cents for legal fees. So like we can do with you pretty much whatever we want. And so that's like a bad family acting badly. And then Dr. Terminus is like, well, I only care about money. I don't care about the health of people. I don't really, I'll trick people into buying things. And I think kids need to understand that like in this world there are people that are they're going to try and sell you a supplement on Instagram. They're, oh, I'm an influencer. Look at this. I took these pills and I lost 30 pounds off my gut. And it's like, are you sure? Are you sure about that? Are you really just trying to get at my money? So it's like, no, I think we all need that reminder, just
yeah,
how easily we get sucked into mobs and frenzies and all this other stuff.
I don't know if you were seeing this, but I almost saw the relationship between like crypto schemes. Like when I
Mm,
was watching that, I feel like that's almost the modern day snake oil nowadays because to you can sell it to people like, hey, this is a get rich quick scheme. Like you can
yep.
go ahead and even today, I know people that are trying to like, oh, this next coin, this is going to be the one that goes to the moon. Like this is, I'm like,
Yep.
and again, like you guys do what you want with your own money, but it's a scam.
Yeah. I mean, it's like cash is king, baby. It's like if you have some valuable, tangible thing in your house. I think I remember watching Milton Friedman, the famous economist. He did the very famous Donahue show episode. Phil Donahue, the talk show host from back in the day. But yeah, Professor Milton Friedman, Doctor Milton Friedman, came on his show, and I think you could find it on YouTube in like two parts. But I think in the second part, it gets to like the question and answer from the audience. And so a gentleman asks like, what can we do to save ourselves against the rises of inflation? And again, this interview I think took place like in late 70s or early 80s. So it's like right in that probably the late 70s, because I think it was like the oil crisis and all this stuff that they were talking about. And man, you listen to that now and how relevant it is to our times now. But in that question that Dr. Friedman was answering, he's like, there is very little that you can do against the ravages of inflation as a single person. But you know what? You buy yourself a nice house, You get yourself a nice suit, you get some art to hang on the wall. That's how you protect yourself from the ravages of inflation. And so all these people that are like, oh, if I just buy imaginary NFT tokens, that'll be my way to secure my future. It's like, well, no, it's like you get a, if you're fortunate and blessed to be able to get a mortgage to have a house that you're building equity on, or like, oh, I have a car and I make payments on it and I make sure that that's secure, or I have like a nice Funko Pop collection that I'll one day turn around to sell. Like a Funko Pop has more value in this day and age than some cryptocurrency. Because you can
Yes.
definitely see people's crazy Funko Pop collections. You see their influencer videos of like, here's my wall full of Funko Pops and stuff.
I'm just banging out that one of my Pokemon cards from when I was little is going to be my retirement plan one of these days.
One of my 1990s Beanie Babies that's still mint with the tag. It's like, that'll be the one that I can sell for 15 grand or whatever.
And it's going to happen.
You wait. That tie-dyed little thing is gonna save me one day.
I could get sucked down that, but I feel like we've already covered a good chunk of chapter 3 already, but I'm just going to go through the lessons so we can do it. But a storm hits as Paul's ship approaches, revealing that he's survived and on his way home. Dr. Terminus lures Pete into their trap, trapping Pete and bringing Elliot to rescue him. Elliot breaks free and rescues Pete, and in the process, Goggins' legal document is destroyed and they finally give up. Elliot saves the mayor and the townspeople from falling utility pole, proving his goodness. Elliot reignites the lamp house lamp with his fire, saving Paul's ship and reuniting him with Nora. Elliot explains to Pete that since he has now a family, he must leave to help another child in need. Pete tearfully bids him farewell as Elliot flies away, disappearing into the sky. And I mean, it was a meaningful little bit at the very end.
I mean, like I said, I'm a dad of a 4-year-old, and even I found myself tearing up because I was imagining my own son having to like say goodbye to a friend. Like the first time that'll have to happen. Like, and I'm a military brat, and I grew up. I was born overseas, and I lived overseas for a time. I lived in Germany back when it was still divided between West Germany and East Germany. That definitely tells you how old I am. And so yeah, I you know it's only when my dad finally retired from active duty in the U.S. Air Force and we settled in Houston that I was finally really truly able to form friendships and stuff like that. But that by that point, I was maybe about Pete's age or a little bit older. So like once I made a friend, like it was a little bit easier. But the idea of like thinking or imagining myself in my son's shoes of like, oh, I have this imaginary friend. I'm sure someone smarter than me with a psychology or a psychiatry degree will be like, oh, this trickster figure is actually like some psychological creation manifested of like some trauma response, and it's how I'm surviving and coping in the world. But now that I have a stable loving family to look after me and care for me, I don't have to turn to that anymore, and that I can be safe and comfortable with a family. Man, now I'm getting emotional just thinking about that, being a dad of like, I would want nothing more than for Pete to feel safe and with a happy home. So yeah, it was really touching, and I had to look it up, but you know, my parents loved to listen to oldies and stuff like that. And so in January of 1963, that's when the song Puff the Magic Dragon came out. And in that song very much has very similar vibes to this movie, because the song talks about like, let's see, the lyrics of Puff the Magic Dragon based on a 1959 poem by Leonard Lipton, then a 19-year-old Cornell University student. And he drew inspiration from Ogden Nash's poem, The Tale of Custard the Dragon. And the song tells the story of an immortal dragon named Puff and his playmate Jackie Paper as they embark on adventures in the fictional county of Honolulu. As time passes, Jackie matures and abandons his childhood games, leaving Puff alone and saddened. So kind of like the inverse of like, oh, I'm safe, I have a family, I have stability and structure. And then Elliot recognizes like, okay, my job is done. I have to go help another boy or another little girl to have safety, to be a fun trickster figure, but also a protector for them as well.
I have brought this up multiple times on the podcast, but I feel like this is actually an excellent spot just to dive in a little bit deeper. I very similarly to you, I moved around quite a bit when I was younger, not because I was a military brat, but just because I had a mom who loves house hunting and a dad who kept switching jobs up. So that caused just a lot of chaos there. And I think I've lived in a total of 28 different homes throughout the duration of my life. So
Certainly more than me, that's for sure.
I mean, for me, I just got used to moving around, and like the longest place during my childhood that I lived anywhere was 5 years. And it definitely had an effect. And for me, I definitely am more of an introvert. That might be a shock to some of you guys in the audience, but in social settings, I'm the guy who's sort of just in the corner, just more watching and just being like, hey, this is fun. Like we're interacting. And a way that I sort of combated that was just reading fantasy. Like I loved reading and I would just escape into books, and I felt like I just connect with characters. I'd connect with stories. And I feel like you can see that almost parallel there of just like, okay, Pete's escaping the horrors of what he's experienced, not necessarily by reading, but just running to this fantasy. And even though Elliot is real, I can see that metaphor of like, hey, even though Pete's all these horrible things that are going on, he's still optimistic. He's still filled with hope, still filled with joy because he has this fantasy character until he gets into a stable situation and he doesn't need the fantasy to be his reality anymore.
Right. Very similar to Mary Poppins as well. You know, she's this fantastical figure who shows up when the Banks children need them because they need a nanny. And it's only when, you know, truly that the family is what needs to be healed. It's Mr. Banks who needs to be healed. And again, if you watch that fantastic movie, you know, Saving Mr. Banks, and fantastic movie, you know, getting to explore more into P.L. Travers' actual life and like what the story of Mary Poppins was meant to represent, of like healing and finding and saving her dad. And so then that's why in the movie, it's like really you have the poignant scenes at the end where Mr. Banks, you know, stands up for like what's right. And he's like, no, I'm going to, you know, I'm going to be with my family. I'm not going to like just give my soul away to the bank. I'm going to go fly a kite. And that's what I'm going to go do with my family. And it's only then, once the mom and the dad and the kids are all healed as a family unit, that Mary Poppins is like, well, time to get my magical umbrella and just fly off on the wind and go to the next family that needs a nanny.
Yeah, and I did actually really like that they went that direction rather than like with Puff, because I honestly thought that Puff and Pete's Dragon, that was the same story, but I'm glad that they went with the, oh no, he's going to go help somebody else, rather than the reverse Tinkerbell situation where he's just ceasing to exist because Pete doesn't believe in him anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like it's not a situation of like, oh, he's growing up out of childhood and not having the magic anymore. It's just like, oh, I'm safe now. I have stability. I have a mother figure. I have a father figure. I have a grandpa figure, and I'm going to grow up and I'm going to, you know, I'm just trying to, not that I know Disney, you know, everyone's like, oh, direct to DVD, direct to streaming sequel of like Pete's Dragon 2 of like, well, how are we going to shoehorn the dragon to come back in? But it'd be interesting for a short story or like a different kind of movie of just like, you know, years later, it's like, you know, we're maybe like after the ravages of the First World War, and it's like Pete's grown up and he's just working in the lighthouse. And ooh, okay, well, now if Disney's is listening, it's after the First World War because Pete has served and he has PTSD and he needs his dragon back. And so Elliot the dragon shows back up. And then people begin to wonder, like, oh, is this a PTSD thing? You have shell shock. You know, you can't cope with reality with coming back from the war. But then there's some plight or problem in the town, or like some strain in the relationship of the family. And then, you know, Elliot reveals himself once again. And then it's like, okay, there's the healing and the bonding, and everything's back again. And then Elliot, you know, is this still charming self of like, and then it's like somehow he's still able to understand even after all these years. So that would be a fascinating sequel that I would be okay with watching. I think that would be a very interesting story to tell.
Well, I love that and I want that so desperately, but also you have to understand, Kurt, I have talked so much crap on Disney on this podcast, so I don't know if any executives are listening in too quickly. But I do love that because that would make so much sense for just the trauma of it, like, yeah, having them come back from World War One and just experiencing that. And maybe he had a girlfriend or a wife before he went off to war and had to come back, and it's not necessarily him finding a family, but trying to piece back the pieces for him together to come back and be that person for the family. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll get back into the writing room and figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a nice portrait of Lampy in the lighthouse, and then Paul and Nora there, I guess, taking care of the lighthouse, and all the other townspeople around town are, just trying to make sense of things. Yeah, after the First World War. Yeah, fascinating drama upcoming from Disney, coming soon to Disney Plus fall 2028.
Well,
This
I
is
mean,
a parody
there's
for legal reasons. It's not really a thing that's happening. Sorry, I had to cover you to make sure that you weren't on the hook.
hey, come at me, Disney. I'll take you. I'll take you home. Just kidding. Just kidding. You might disagree with this, but I almost would have rather that Paul was in the movie throughout than, because it almost feels like an afterthought.
I do agree. It's like suddenly, and maybe that's something I didn't understand as a kid, but it's like, oh, the ship is sailing. Like you need the drama of like, oh, okay, it's a storm and there's a ship on the water. Okay, we see the lighthouse, and then a big wave comes and knocks out the light, and it's like, no, like I can't see the shore anymore. And that's a very real problem. I understand for those of you who actually know what it takes to sail and stuff like that. I've got my in-laws that were in the Navy and my own maternal grandfather that was in the Navy. So I'm sure it's very scary of being out on the pitch black water. It's a storm. You can't see the shoreline. It's like, we got to get to harbor. How are we going to do that? That's what lighthouses, that's their purpose, that's what they serve. So yeah, it would have been interesting. It would have made the movie longer, but maybe if you'd reworked some scenes where an interesting scene if Elliot had, because Paul explains like, oh, I was in a hospital bed because I shipwrecked. I had amnesia. I didn't remember who I was. And then I fell out of bed and bonked my head. It would have been very interesting, a funny scene if we saw Elliot on his misadventure, like searching around trying to find Paul, and then he's stumbling around the hospital wing or the recovery home or wherever Paul is, and then shows him bumping out of bed and knocking his head, and then just him starting to be like, Nora, and then he goes off into a song, and then we get a song about like him remembering who he was, and he's like singing to the other patients in their beds, and then everyone's up and around, and they're using their bedpans as accessories for their dance number. That would have been lovely. That would have been fun. They probably didn't want to give kids ideas with like using bedpans as accessories in a dance number. Probably the only reason why it wasn't included.
I see, again, that would have just made the movie that much more like it literally feels like an afterthought with Paul. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that would have really enhanced it. But also, I understand, because we were saying at the top of this that this movie was over 2 hours, and that would have added another 15 minutes bare minimum.
Right. Unless you cut something out. If there was something in the middle that could have been cut or made shortened a little bit, yeah, then you could have replaced it with a scene where Elliot stumbles and finds Paul and then gets him to remember who he is, and like, oh, I got to get on a ship. I got to go back. I got to go back to Passamaquoddy and go back to Nora, go find my love.
Well, since we're getting towards the end, I was saving this question more towards the end, and it's not really necessarily a deep question, but I'm still just curious. Kurt, what was your favorite song in this musical that you?
It's got to be. It's Not Easy. Of course, I'm a big fan of many. As a music major, I'm a big fan of a lot of musical genres, but I would say during the 2000s, early 2000s, as I was like in high school, starting to head into college, I know the gateway. It was the Brian Waterman Flash animated cartoons, and they used Five Iron Frenzy's Cannonball. And before that, I know a friend of mine burned a CD with Five Iron Frenzy's One Girl Army on it. So that started, and of course, growing up in the late 90s, you couldn't escape modern alternative radio without hearing the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and stuff like that. So you'd hear like third wave ska music. Eventually, all that to say, that's how I found out about Real Big Fish. And Real Big Fish, years later in my college era, they did a combined album, I think, with Zoloft and the Rock and Roll Destroyers is the name of the band. But on that album, they did a cover version of It's Not Easy. And that helped me to remind me of like, oh yeah, that's the song from Pete's Dragon. And it's a very lovely song early on back in Act 1 of the movie when Pete is brought into the lighthouse. Nora has decided, oh, I'm going to take you in. And then, he's explaining about the dragon, and she's kind of like, oh, this dragon. And so then it's very much a song about like a kid who's like, yeah, let me describe this dragon to you. And then, opening up his heart a little bit, talking about how it's not been easy because I'm an orphan kid who doesn't have parents and I don't have friends, but Elliot's my friend. And, he's my true blue friend. And then Nora's also using that song as a way to reflect about like, well, I have a lost love that's, gone away and I wish for him to return, but he hasn't returned yet. And so then by the end of the song, Pete is able to say, in true, honest to goodness kidness, which I believe with, like, again, the example of my 4-year-old son is like, well, now I have 2 friends. I had 1, but now I have 2. Miss Nora, you are my friend now. And it's just so endearing and warming to the heart. And then, she's like, yeah, I could be your friend. So yeah, It's Not Easy is probably my favorite song in the whole thing.
That one was a really good one. I mean, all of them have a level of enjoyment. I wasn't the biggest fan of the opening one. I feel like they could have opened with something stronger than the happiest home in these with the Goggins. But at the same time, it makes sense, the Goggins. I really, as dark and twisted as it was, I loved every little piece. I feel like it was a really fun one.
Yes, that's a fun song. My wife got curious when she was like, oh, this movie. And she was like, oh, did you know this song from Pete's Dragon was nominated for an Oscar? The one that you mentioned, Candle on the Water, rather. And you know what it lost to? You Light Up My Life was the song at the Oscars that beat out Candle on the Water.
I mean, you can't beat it. But if we're going also with just the choreograph, like, you can't beat I Saw a Dragon.
Saw a Dragon was good. And Brazzle Dazzle Day. That's the one where they're painting the lighthouse and they take the buoy all the way up to the top of the lighthouse. And it's just Lampy and Nora and Pete just having a fun song and dance number of like, oh, we're taking care of the lighthouse, we're cleaning up, and we're being a family, sort of a song.
Yeah. I think it was really lighthearted. If I had to cut one just for the sake of time, though, that'd probably be the one I'd cut out, though, just because I don't know how much it really, other than like showing that they did bond as a family. But at the same time, it was one of those more lighthearted moments. But when it did pop up, I was like, oh, I would have much rather have gotten the Paul musical number.
Well, There's Room for Everyone was also a nice song. That was the one that was in the town. And, it's Nora being able to explain, because that's like everyone's talking about like, oh, Pete doesn't belong here and his crazy dragon. But she's leading all the kids at the school to be like, no, there's room for everyone. And I was surprised that even the line in the song about like, and that's what, it's an explicit reference to like God, Christian God. So it's like, well, I mean, that makes sense for the time period, but I was like, oh, that's really, I don't know, progressive or conservative, if you will, but just kind of like, because to me growing up, like the most God movie of Disney would be The Hunchback of Notre Dame, because that's like explicitly, about a Catholic cathedral in Paris, France during medieval France. So the fact that like, oh, there's room for everyone has at least one part of the lyric that talks about like, there's room for everyone because like, that's what God wants. Like, that's what God preaches. That's what God intends. And our Easter North, our New England fishing town built on Protestant Christian ideals, like, that should be good enough for us. And it's like, that should be hopefully believable to a 1970s Disney audience as well.
For sure. On that note, is there anything else that you want to highlight of this section or just the film in general before we dive into the Dragon Grade?
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice bit of nostalgia to get to rewatch the movie. I hadn't watched it in a long time. And because before this, I would have seen the 2011 remake, which in my head, I immediately started doing comparisons because I was like, the 2011 remake makes it more modern. It's on the complete opposite end of the country because I'm pretty sure that one, it's like, it's the Pacific Northwest, and Pete is a child that survived a horrific car crash and became like a feral kid living in the woods. And he had befriended this dragon, like this mythical dragon creature that lived in the Pacific Northwest. And then he becomes friends with like a little girl and her dad who are like park rangers. And their big antagonistic thing is they're dealing with like illegal logging operations in the Pacific Northwest. And then they find out the dragon's real and they're like, well, shoot, we can make more money like selling this dragon to science than we can like harvesting these acres and acres of trees and federally protected forest lands and stuff like that. So I don't know. I like the whimsy of the original one as opposed to the more modern one. Like the modern one's okay, but it's like there's just something nice about it's not easy to to find someone who cares, and then like have this lighthearted but also at times very serious family musical that I think everyone needs to take a load off and just be like, you know what? Let's just enjoy this musical together. It's got animated dragons, it's got fishing villages and dance numbers and catchy songs. So why not?
I have a lot of similar thoughts to that, and I will go a little bit deeper when we actually get to the Dragon Grade portion, just because we do have a chapter on the film overall. But it was a very, I did enjoy the lightheartedness. I liked that it's one of those movies that you could just turn on and you're going to at least enjoy it, if not for the nostalgia's sake. It's not something that you need to necessarily pay too close attention to, which like if you had it just working on in the back, or if you had it on at like just a party, like it's one of those films that could potentially work for that. And also, like I just said, I'm a nostalgic for those actual sets. We're seeing so many films moving to just completely computer animated sets.
Right. Well, I mean, what the Mandalorian's been able to do with their set now, like that thing is pretty cool. Like there are some degrees of like being able to use technology to give you like a really cool scene, or like,
of course,
voice actors and video game studios that like use, oh, I'm going to put all the dots and the rigs on and suddenly I'm Indiana Jones in the Great Circle, which is what I've been playing now. Have been enjoying it. So like Troy Baker, top notch. I know this isn't an Indiana Jones podcast, but Troy Baker did a top notch, and just getting to see computer animated version 1980s Harrison Ford has just been delightful. And I don't think Harrison Ford has done a dragon movie, but maybe he should before his film acting career is completely done.
Yeah, I mean, we had Val Kilmer on, rest in peace over there.
Yes, Val Kilmer, rest in peace.
We did we covered Willow a few months back. Even though I know the Eborskis is not technically a dragon, we were saying, you know what, we're willing to make the stretch on
Suspend disbelief, yeah.
But on that note, let's go ahead and dive into our dragon grade if you're all right with that, Kurt.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Each week, we go ahead and grade our dragon that we see in the film on a scale of 0 to 10 in 5 categories. Those 5 categories are design, special effects, character, film, and X factor. 0 being abysmal, 10 being incredible, and 5 being okay. Now, Kurt, on a scale of 0 to 10, what would you give Elliot the dragon in design?
Design. Let's see. And so 0 is abysmal, 10 is like no notes, awesome, and then 5 is okay. So for me personally, I would say Elliot would score, I want to say in my heart, like an 8. He's good. He's not like great. He's not the GOAT, but he's great. Like obviously you have Don Bluth as the animating director, and you have other great animators who work to bring Elliot to life. His colors are very vivid. They feel very fairy tale like. Again, my theme or my idea in a D&D context being like, this is a dragon that has lived and been warped by the Feywild, or he is some Fey trickster who is just taking the guise of a dragon form. But yeah, like very bright colors with the pinks and the greens. He's kind of like big and chunky. So he's not like sleek and, angular. He's just kind of like a big, he's got like a big belly that like, Pete could go curl up on and take a nap. And, his tail, like the very end of his tail is like, it's kind of like another hand for him because he uses it to like grab stuff or like, reassure or tap someone's shoulder, stuff like that. So even like, even the humor of like him having to like kickstart him blasting fire and stuff like that. It's not like an automatic thing he does. So yeah, I mean, I'd say an 8 on the design. I think, he is a very good cartoon, family friendly animated dragon that's not going to scare the kids. He's going to make them laugh and feel like very trusting and warm and be a good snuggle bug of a protector.
I can totally respect that. I think that's a very appropriate answer for it. I don't know if I'm going to be as generous as you are for him. I'm going to give him a 6. I think he's good. Yeah. Personally, when it comes to dragons, and again, everyone in the audience knows this, so they're going to be rolling their eyes like hearing my spiel. I like bigger. I like the more reptilian looking dragons. Now, again, he seemed almost like a mammal, but I also think that they wanted him to feel more warm. They wanted him to feel more like a family. While
He's
when we
both a
get
fish and a mammal, don't you know? He has got the ears of a cow, the neck of a camel. So it's like a very kid. I was gonna say that song was on, and it made me think of like a medieval depiction of like, well, here's the Tarrasque, or like here is like some medieval depiction in a manuscript of like, all right, I want you to describe the creature. Okay, so he's got the head of a crocodile, he has the neck of a camel, but he has the ears of a cow, and he's both a fish and a mammal. Yeah, that probably looks like what a French manuscript in the Middle Ages would depict, like a Tarrasque. Actually, maybe even sounds like if you go to the Wikipedia page for a Tarrasque, I'm pretty sure that's like really close, or maybe even like Egyptian depictions of mythological creatures from them as well. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. No, and that's the thing. Like and it's gonna definitely get more credit in the X Factor. But for me, like I definitely prefer my scare. Like I love my Vagars. I love my Caraxes. I even really enjoy, or I do enjoy, if we're talking Studio Ghibli, the Haku. And I feel like that's a great design right there.
The Dragon Ball Z dragon.
The Dragon Ball Z dragon, yeah.
Fung Foom from Marvel comic books.
Yes, but I'm not going to be bashing on it. It's still good, but not necessarily what I'd be picking. But again, it's going to score a lot better in this next section. What do you give it for special effects?
Ooh, special effects. Yeah, I feel like this one, well, actually for me, it may go a little bit lower than 8. So I might give this maybe a 6.5 or a 7. Again, like I said, it would have been really cool. You know, they had the technology. We saw the scene with the netting, and you saw like the wireframe of the dragon moving, but like at different parts. Well, okay, I take it back. When he goes through the cement, that you do see big dragon footprints there, but in other parts where it was like dirt or grass, that might have been cool to see like more dragon footprints there, because that would have built up the mystery of like, we can't see this thing, but like its footprints are like literally littering the town. So, but yeah, I mean, otherwise it had believability in the world. Like it was a good blending of being able to make you believe in the real world that like, oh, this 2D animated creature is taking up space in the real world. So I'll go 7. I'll go 7 on that. There obviously could have been room for improvement, but I think they did a great job with the technology that they had at the time. The shading on the animated creature when he was in the real life, in the real world, was, I think, good job, Don Bluth. I know you're still kicking, so good job, Don Bluth.
I couldn't agree more. I think 7 is very appropriate, which translates to very good. I think it was very good, especially for the time period. And really, throughout the film, a lot of the special effects were really holding up. I love the amount of practical effects. Yeah, boom, we did it.
I was just trying to make sure the focus on me was good, because I started getting a little fuzzy. So I was like, oh, maybe the trick of where I get it to trick to focus on me a little bit better. But yeah, high five, yeah, for the 7. Yeah, there we go.
I was going to steal that high five there. But what I'm saying also is really the only part that I thought that the animation was lacking was that final scene where Paul is on the boat. And that doesn't even involve Elliot at all. Like it's not, we're not seeing Elliot in that. They clearly were putting a lot of their budget in the animation studio towards making Elliot look good. Like when Elliot put his hand on Hoagie's shoulder, that looked real. Like that looked authentic. Like that didn't look like, obviously it was animated, but at the same time,
even in the stairwell, like when Elliot is trapped in the stairwell in the lighthouse, and he's trying to puff up bigger so he can make a big gout of fire in order to light the wick of the candle. Like it does a shot where it shows like the winding staircase up, and it's dark, and you can see like Elliot like squeezed against the staircase. So it's like, yeah, I think they did a top notch blending the animation with the shots, with the good lighting and everything.
no, I think 7 is very appropriate. Going on to the next section, character. I'm really curious to hear what you're going to give Elliot the dragon for character.
I know it's safe to say 5, but I could go a little bit higher than 5. So I might say like, I might say like another 7, just because it's like, he's relatable to Pete. Pete feels safe around him, and everyone that he meets is like, once they accept the fact of like, oh, the dragon is real. Like if they're an antagonist, they're like, that dragon, get that dragon. Or if they're like a friend, they're like, oh, wow, Elliot, you're real. Like, this is awesome. You're going to save the day, or you're going to help us, or you're going to do a thing. So yeah, as far as a character, I know some people maybe have complained that it's like, oh, they got this, this great individual, Charlie Callis doing the vocal effects for Elliot, a dragon, and he's, let's see, Charlie Callis, American actor and comedian, most commonly known for his work with Mel Brooks, Jerry Lewis, and Dean Martin in his many stand-up appearances on television talk shows in the 1970s. So, I mean, you have a major comedian of the time, it would be like, Eddie Murphy is like donkey. It would be like if Eddie Murphy the donkey was just like, and he just like made donkey noises the whole time, where it's like, oh, you have this comedian who's just like, and that's like all he does as far as talking. But maybe that's all right, because then it's like a secret language that Pete knows how to speak. So that might be the only ding I give it as far as a character. It might have been nice to know like what Elliot the Dragon was thinking, what he could say or what he could communicate. But maybe that's kind of the genius of the character, because like this is, we're viewing Elliot from Pete's childhood perspective. And so we're just supposed to feel it in our hearts. We're supposed to get it from context clues. We're not necessarily needing an omniscient voice telling us like, Morgan Freeman steps in to be like, well, now, Pete, I must go and go help another child. It's just like, oh, and it's like, we know that Elliot's sad, and we know that what he's trying to say is like, well, you've got a family, I have to go on. That might be the ding of like, he doesn't speak, but maybe that's kind of the genius, is that he doesn't actually really need to speak for you to know what he's thinking and feeling and saying.
Well, I do want the Morgan Freeman cut of Pete's Dragon where Morgan Freeman is Elliot. I feel like that'd be an amazing movie.
The Gorgons were a nasty family who tricked a boy into slavery.
Let me go ahead and sink them to the bottom of the river right there. No, I do get where you're coming from. I think I was a little bit more generous towards Elliot with this one, because I feel like you don't ever really question Elliot's character. He's wearing his heart on his sleeve throughout the film, and I will ding him because yes, I think it does make a difference that he's not actually talking, and we've constantly said the best form of a dragon is a dragon that's able to speak calm, you might say. And I think that's one of my favorite things about just villain dragons or just hero dragons.
Like Smaug. Like Smaug is an intelligent talking dragon, and I know you covered the 77 Hobbit, Rankin Bass Hobbit on this show, on this podcast already. So, having like a cowboy actor guy be the voice of Smaug, and that is like completely different than watching the Peter Jackson Hobbit trilogy, and you have Benedict Cumberbatch coming in doing the motion capture for Smaug, but then also doing the voice acting for Smaug as well.
Well, I mean, just using that as an example, like that just shows the difference, because again, like Smog did okay. He could have done, but I know he's going to do a lot better in Desolation, just because the voice that you hear coming from Benedict Cumberbatch for Smog is unearthly. It's sinister. While the other one is almost got that Southern twang to it. I'm like, okay, are we just saying that the Southern twang makes you evil over here? Or what's going on over here?
Right.
But going back to Elliot, I think that he does a really good job of just relaying of what he's going through. You can tell that his main goal is to help Pete. He's obviously a very tricksy sort of guy. He loves pulling little pranks and just playing. I'm willing to give him a 9. I think I think that we get a lot of character, and the only thing I'm digging him on is, yeah, he's not actually speaking common where we understand, but he's speaking his own little made up language with Pete.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know if you have many guests that amend their answers, but the fact that I gave a 7 and you gave a 9, I could always meet in the middle and bump it up to an 8, I suppose.
Hey, I mean, if you want to stay with the 7, you can stay with the 7. But if you want to move it to 8,
I'm willing to go up to 8. I think that's a great argument that you made, because I was just thinking of like character as just like him as a character in the movie, but you actually also mean like his character as his character of like, okay, now I see what you mean. So it's like, yeah, I think I think an 8 is a solid number for that.
The beauty of this rating system and the podcast in general, Kurt, is it's like Calvin Ball. You can make up the rules as you go along. You can do whatever you want as it comes along. And if you want to do away with a rule, you can just throw it out as well. Right. Now, I'm really curious with this one as well for you. What did you give the film score on a scale of 0 to 10?
Okay, 0 to 10. I did hear that you are a letterbox user, and I know you made a comment that I'm a very generous rater, and that is true. I have a lower threshold to cross as far as like if I enjoy something. I'm not a snooty critic or anything like that. It's like if I enjoy it, then I enjoy it. I know for me, as far as letterbox was concerned, I gave this a 3.5 out of 5. So if I had to compare, if I had to like convert that to this, I might say, maybe like a 6.5 or something like that. Like it's above okay. Again, it's a time commitment of a movie to have to sit down and watch. So it's like it's if I'm trying to remember watching it from my childhood, it's like I was a techie VCR operating kid by the age of 2. So it's like my parents were probably just like, go crazy, knock yourself out. You know how to use a VCR? You want to watch this movie 3 times today? You go for it, kid. And then you can figure that out. But like even trying to convince my 4-year-old to want to sit down and watch this with me. And only tonight he was finally like, okay, I'm ready to watch this movie. I'm buddy, it's bedtime. Like we're not going to sit down and watch a 2-hour movie right now. Maybe tomorrow, like when I'm done with work, then we can come home and watch this movie together. But I'm imagining his 4-year-old attention span. He'll watch it like in bits and parts. Like, and maybe that's what I was doing as a kid because I was playing, I had the movie on, and so it was nice background. And that's how I only, as a kid, remember certain poignant scenes sticking out. And then the rest of it just kind of like mushed and muddled away. And I didn't pay attention to it until I had to force myself to watch it for this podcast and be like, oh, I see the deeper, richer story going on. But as a kid, I had no appreciation for it whatsoever. So 3.5 stars on Letterboxd, 6.5 for this podcast rating system.
Okay. No, I think we sort of lined up pretty similarly. I gave it a 6. I'm saying it was good. And it's sort of a very similar thing where like the overall story was pretty great. I enjoyed it. There were a few of the actors I feel like the most unrealistic part of the movie is when people actually start discovering Elliot as a dragon. They're like, "Oh wow, a dragon." And then just like everything was normal. And I'm like,
Right.
I don't know about you, but if I discovered a dragon, I'd be doing a little bit more. I'd be acting
You'd
a
be
little
more
bit
like
more.
Hoagie. You'd be like panicking and freaking out. Yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I also think that it did just like I keep dinging it for it, but I think it just went on too long. I think they needed to just shave off some of it. If it was 90 minutes, I think 90 minutes would have made it up to at least an 8 for me. But I also don't know what they would have shaved out of
Right.
making it 90 minutes.
Right. To tell the whole comprehensive story.
Exactly. 6 for me, which does mean we are here at the last section, the X Factor. Now, just a quick reminder, X Factor is just giving it credit for whatever you want it to do and also just the level of uniqueness that this dragon is. So what do you give Elliot the dragon on a scale of 0 to 10?
I feel like, I'm coming at it again from my Dungeons and Dragons minded brain and just rewatching this movie and getting inspiration to be like, okay, if I'm going to stick Elliot the dragon in my D&D game, a non-conventional sort of dragon, because everyone thinks of like, oh, a dungeon. Yes, there must be a dragon in there or some cave or some lair, but it's like, actually, he's just a tricksy guy from the Feywild, from the fairy realm, and he just happens to be following around a kid, sort of, kind of like as you alluded to with Critical Role in the campaign 2, Laura Bailey's character basically making I thought it would have been more appropriate as an archfey warlock pack, because considering since Artagan or the Traveler was revealed to be an archfey in the mortal plane. But yeah, Pete's dragon kind of serves like an archfey sort of a character. So Definitely. If I had to introduce him in my D&D game, it's like, yeah, is he an archfey in disguise, or is he really just a dragon who's been warped by the magics of the Feywild, and now he just kind of serves as like this tricksy figure that pops in and out, and he helps and has an endearment for kids and wants to help them out, be their protector and stuff like that. So I guess I might give it for the X Factor. I might give it a 9. Why not? For D&D practicality and implementation, like you could do a lot of interesting things in a D&D game if you had an Elliot the Dragon running around, especially if you're going to play with kids. Kids love being able to have their own dragon that they can summon. So it's like, oh yeah, Elliot the Dragon shows up and they're like, yay, Elliot the Dragon. What's he going to do now? Oh, he knocks over a cart. He does this. He does that. and the kids are laughing and having a great time. And even the adults are like, wait a minute, is this an Elliot the Dragon reference? Like, are you saying we get to summon our own dragon whenever is convenient for us or when we're stuck on some plot point? Yeah, I think it would be great to have an Elliot the Dragon around. So 9 on the X Factor.
I definitely agree with that. I don't think we're ever going to see another dragon like Elliot the Dragon in the 1977. Like it's almost wondering like if they initially wanted to pick out a dragon, because nothing about Elliot gave off really dragon vibes, because typically dragons, especially within like myths and lore, dragons are depicted as being selfish. They're depicted as being like solitary creatures. They're
And
not
being a
depicted.
chromatic dragon, a green dragon, they're like, they're vain, and they live in jungles, and they want to be like conniving and sneaking, and they want to play people against each other. But it's like Elliot is like the complete opposite. Yeah, like you were joking about earlier, Elliot is the derpy cousin of Ryshawn from Critical Role's Chroma Conclave arc, and is just like, I've just been in the Feywild for a long time, and you know what? All that stuff about green dragons really doesn't matter anymore. So I'm just gonna help kids because that's what I like to do. I like to be a good helper and
Yeah,
not a bad guy anymore.
exactly. It's one of those things that you don't see any of that maliciousness. You don't see any of that. Like he's very selfless of it. Like the most selfish thing is that he's trying to get Pete to leave school so he can play. But even that, like, do you even call that selfish? Like that's playfulness. So it's very interesting that they took that particular approach. And again, I'm not angry that they chose to pick a dragon for this, but I could see them picking a different race of monster
Mm-hmm.
for this particular
Yeah,
thread.
like it could have been like like 3 pixies in a trench coat or something like that, and like, oh, these pixies are getting into trouble. Like, boy, like what are we gonna do?
Like I could even see a troll. Like they could have done a troll. Like I feel like Elliot would have made a great troll. I don't
Elliot, it
know.
does sound like a pretty good troll name. Not for like some keyboard guy named Elliot who's just a troll on the internet. No, like a troll that's just like, I'm here in the bridge and Pete wants to hang out. Okay, sure. We'll go hang out with Pete for a while.
He's like, I want to go play on the slide on the swings, Elliot. I mean, there we go, Pete. But all that being said, I agree. 9 is what I gave Elliot as well in the X Factor. I really don't think we're ever going to see anything like Elliot again. The only thing that I think is really unoriginal is just I think green is the most stereotypical dragon color that you could possibly pick, but everything else I think is very original, and we're not going to ever see anything like him. Which the final score of Elliot the Dragon and Pete's Dragon of 1977 comes out to be a 7.55, which translates between very good and great, which, I am not upset about. I think that that's very appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And on that closes our coverage of Pete's Dragon of 1977. Kurt, thank you so much for being willing to come on and just talk about it. Where can everybody find you? And I'd love for you just to be able to plug everything that you got going on right now.
Sure. Well, hey, out there in podcast YouTube land, thank you so much for sticking around and having me as a guest. Yeah, so my normal thing is I run a podcast called Sidekicks and Sidequests, the best unofficial Dungeons and Dragons podcast, in my humbly biased opinion. The point of the show is that, I invite guests on who are and are not in the hobby. They are, big name people from like Johnny Stanton the Fourth or Adam Bradford, who developed D&D Beyond and other greats, to just like, my personal best friends and people that I just find interesting and want to talk to. And we do a short personal interview section in the first section. We go into character creation or an NPC creation section. And that's all done either by random dice rolls or someone comes in with an idea. Maybe someone wants to do a parody of a character. So someone comes to me and they're like, well, I want to make it Elliot the Dragon NPC. Okay, well, let's go work our way through the questions and be able to create this character and give them a side quest. Because then the idea is that we're going to take this character, we're going to give them for you to bring to your next D&D game as someone in your backstory, or your dungeon master's like, I need to shake things up. I need a new interesting NPC for them to meet. Okay, great. Here's this NPC that they can meet, and they've already got a side quest ready to go. And there's a little roleplay vignette section where it's a random encounter. So it's a chance to breathe like a life into the character. So you get to hear how that character might sound in an actual game. And then we wrap up, and then that's typically an episode. And as you very graciously pointed out, we're closing in on an actual count of 150 episodes. We're in season 6. I've scaled back to monthly episodes, but I've got a large back catalog that you can go through and hear all the fun interviews that I've been able to do with amazing, awesome people. And then just the fun NPCs that we've made. And believe me, I've been able to use these NPCs in my own game, and just the world building has gone off the charts, from like from an interdimensional chef's guild to, oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of all the various things that have come about in my game just because of these goofy NPCs that have been made through random dice rolls and stuff. So if you want to learn more about the podcast, as you can see in the banner art here behind me, you can go to the podcast website, sidekicksansidequests.com. That's all spelled out. You can find me on all social medias, all the big platforms, at Side K as in Kilo, Q as in Quest podcast, a Side KQ podcast. Like I said, we're on Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, Threads, and all those places and faces. And I'm on YouTube as well. The podcast does back up there as well. So find me on all your major podcast platforms. And if you want to support the show, my schemes all equal out to the lifestyle expenses for D&D 5th edition. So $1, $2, $4, $10 a month are the levels. That's over on Patreon, patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests. And if you don't like Patreon, I have a Ko-fi too. But really, I think that about does it as far as promoting the podcast. I would appreciate it and love it if everyone would check it out and let me know, hey, what's the favorite episode that you decided to latch on to? Maybe your listeners might enjoy the fact that there are, at least to my mind, I think 3 different episodes we've done on dragons for my podcast. So you can always check those out. Maybe if this podcast ever branches out and starts incorporating dragons from other media, perhaps one of my dragons from my podcast will get a review on here to be like, let's do a breakdown of this episode and just see what was this dragon like, and how could we use them in our game. And so that'd be very fun. That's probably ways away down the road, but yeah, any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And would love for you to join my community. Check out a new podcast to listen to when you're driving or doing the dishes or doing the laundry or mowing the lawn or whatever. Learn some new things and discover some new fun characters along the way. We're building a world, one character at a time.
That's awesome. Yeah, everyone go give Kurt a following at Sidekicks and Sidequests. He's doing an awesome job. And yes, he's got some of those awesome dragons going. And just like I was discussing, this podcast is just a big game of Calvin Ball. So I'm sure that sometime, again, there'll be a way to evolve there. But in the meantime, everybody, you guys know what to do. Go give Kurt a follow. If you haven't followed here, give us a subscribe, like, share. Share it with your mom, share it with your dad. Again, thank you, Kurt, and I hope everyone has a great night.
Ta-ta.
That's all for this week's Dragon Lore. Takes cold and hot, spread shore to shore. Enjoyed yourself? Please join the squad. Follow on social media at Big Liz Pod. And one quick reminder before you go, to rate, review, and share the show. Thank you for listening. It means a lot. See you next week, same time, same spot.